Today on Straight Talk Africa, the challenges of consolidating democracy in two West African nations of Nigeria and Senegal. That discussion is coming up next right here on Straight Talk Africa. Hello, welcome Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington. I am Sheikh Sali. And today we are talking about the upcoming presidential elections in Nigeria and Senegal. At least 10 African nations are expected to hold general elections in 2019, according to the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. What's really at stake as these countries use the ballot box to deepen the quality of democratic governance? My colleague Paul Ndiho has more.
Tens of millions of people are expecting to vote in more than 10 African nations in 2019, according to the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, or IFES, a Washington, D.C.-based independent organization that supports citizens' right to participate in free and fair elections in more than 145 countries. Nigerian voters were scheduled to cast their ballots in the nation's presidential and parliamentary elections on February 16th. But just 5 hours prior to the polls opening, the country's independent National Electoral Commission announced a one-week delay in the vote to Saturday, February 23rd. The Commission blamed logistical difficulties, including problems in distribution of ballots and result sheets, as well as sabotage, after 3 fires at its offices in the last 2 weeks.
We believe that ultimately this decision is good for our democracy and for our country. I wish to assure you of our commitment to free, fair, and credible elections.
2 main political parties swiftly accused each other of orchestrating the delay as a way to manipulate the vote, a sentiment echoed by some voters, many of whom had traveled long distances to vote in their hometowns. Political observers are predicting a tight race between incumbent President Muhammadu Buari and chief challenger, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Buari, 75, has been in office since 2015. In Senegal, voters head to the polls on February 24th, where incumbent President Macky Sall is facing 4 other primary challengers. President Sall, 57, was first elected in 2012. 2 opposition leaders, former Dakar Mayor Khalifa Sall and ex-Minister Karim Wade, were barred from running due to previous convictions for misuse of public funds. Thousands of supporters of both former candidates have staged protests in recent months calling for fair and transparent elections. The former French colony is seen as a model of democracy in the region, having never experienced a coup and successfully staging peaceful transfers of power in 2000 and 2012. Stakes are high in South Africa as voters gear up for general elections on May 8th. The ruling African National Congress Party, ANC, is looking to reverse its declining popularity due to weak growth, unemployment, and corruption. The opposition has latched onto ANC's corruption as an election trump card. The ANC is facing a tough fight to retain its dominance and proposing constitutional changes to address land right issues. The far-left South Africa Economic Freedom Fighters Party has land exploration and jobs at the top of its election agenda. Malawians are expected to cast their ballots in tripartite elections on May 21st. Voters will select a president, members of parliament, and local councillors. The election pits incumbent President Peter Mutharika of the Democratic Progressive Party against his former Vice President Saulas Chilema. Political observers say Chilema is seen as the biggest threat to Mutharika. Meanwhile, former President Joyce Banda has also joined the race after reversing a decision to join an alliance with the opposition. Political analysts say her announcement could be a game changer. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
Thanks, Paul, for that interesting report. Joining us in the studio are three distinguished guests. Ambassador Robin Renee Sanders, former ambassador of the United States to Nigeria. Aliyu Mustafa, managing editor of VOA's Hausa service, and Idris Far from VOA's French to Africa unit. From Nigeria, we are joined by VOA's Grace Alheri Abdu, and from Senegal, we are joined by VOA executive producer Sarwa Jafali. I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host the five of you on Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Let's go to Dakar, the Senegalese capital. Good evening, Sarwa.
Hello, Shaka.
How are you?
Very good.
What is the mood like in the land of what I call the land of Osman Sembeni, father of African cinema?
Well, I've been here since Monday, and I can definitely say that the tension is growing as we approach Election Day. I've been driving through town yesterday and today, and people are holding rallies. They're meeting each other in their streets. They're trying to rally people in their neighborhoods. They're chanting support of their candidate, their favorite candidate, but they're also insulting them in the most blunt way. The candidates they don't like. So the tension is definitely growing. Yesterday, I've been on the main street here, the Corniche Street, and it's full of billboards. There are billboards of candidates everywhere. And what was interesting is that most billboards were vandalized, mostly the four candidates, except those of Macky Sall. I'm not saying that Dakar supports Macky Sall 100%. I'm sure if you go to Thiès, for example, the turf of Idrissa Seck, you'll find the same way, pictures of Macky Sall destroyed. So tension is everywhere. People are expecting the elections. Local news are covering the elections, of course. Yesterday, I watched the news bulletin of the public channel here, RS1, and they were showing report after report, reassuring people that the ballots have been distributed, that everything is ready for the electors to go and vote in the most peaceful way. There was like 3 governors giving their statements saying that security will be assured, and they dispatched police and soldiers to make sure that everything is going to be all right. What's interesting, Shaka, yesterday is I was watching, and maybe one of your guests, Idris Fall, can help me with this. So I was watching, and all of a sudden, in the middle of all these reports, there was a report on former President Abdoulaye Wade, and the whole report was basically praise of Abdoulaye Wade. As you know, Abdoulaye Wade is a former president. He came back to Senegal last week to call everybody to not go and vote, to boycott the election. He also said something about burning the ballots. And here in the middle of a news bulletin in public channel, you have praising of this figure, this public figure. So maybe Idris can help me with that, but that was interesting. The other thing, well, there's been some violence a couple of weeks ago, 1 death and many injured, but since then there's been nothing major happening in the country. Macky Sall, as well as the other candidates, have been calling people to calm down and to make sure that they go to vote for their favorite candidate. So we'll see for whom they're going to vote in a couple of days.
Now, sir, we know, of course, that Macky Sall has really been a good leader, someone that has governed his country, at least according to a lot of people, very well. But what about the emergency of the person that seems to be a rising star? I'm talking about Osman Sonko. Is he to a certain degree, drawing traction?
Well, he is in the sense that, well, for starters, he managed to collect the 53,000 signatures necessary for his sponsorship, which was a surprise. I mean, he's a young man. He's 44 years old. He's never been minister before, unlike the other candidates. He's been a public servant for years, but he's been sacked because he published a book criticizing Macky Sall and his entourage and accusing him of corruption. And since then, he's run for to be a member of parliament, which he is since last year. So young people like him because he's kind of a fresh air. I mean, the rest of the candidates are kind of older. We've seen them before. Most of them have worked with former President Abdoulaye Wade. So this Sonko is kind of a new thing, and he uses social media. He's connected to what's going on. Don't forget that I think like more than 80% of Senegal's population is under 40 years old. So people want change. So these young people, they want to see new faces. I can't say for sure that he's going to win this election. Nobody knows. And as you know, polls are forbidden during this period of time. But let me remind you of this survey that's been done by public, private, organization, Senegalese organization in November that gave Macky Sall 45% chance of winning. After him, there's Idrissa Seck and then Souleymane Sonko.
I see. Well, on that note, thank you very, very much, Sarwa, for your briefing.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Let me come to you, Ambassador Robin. I'm sure you know Macky Sall well, and Macky Sall has really been, by all indications, a very good leader. Do you think there is a chance that people in Senegal will probably be voting for Macky Sall for a second term, or are they probably going for change?
I think that, I don't presuppose what voters are going to do because everything on the ground will drive how voters are going to determine who they're going to support. I think that from the perspective here in the United States, we think that Macky Sall has done a very good job in terms of opening up dialogue, the development process, trying to move Senegal forward. But I've learned from years of being an election observer that never presuppose what voters are going to do at the polls if it is a free, fair election that has an even playing field for everyone.
Let me come to you, Aliyu Mustafa. You've had, of course, Salwa on the ground. Do you get the sense that people in Senegal are going to be voting for issues, or are they, in fact, going to be voting for personalities?
I agree with Ambassador Sanders. Elections are terribly unpredictable. It's also dangerous to actually predict what can happen because it might not happen. Senegal is one of those African countries that have enjoyed relative peace and stability compared to other countries on the continent. You know that. And every time a leader is able to keep the country together and maintain peace and order, he gets credit for that. And but it doesn't mean that that's our opinion over here. We don't know what the people in Senegal are thinking or saying, but politics is a system where people differ in their opinions and perceptions. No matter how good a leader is or what good work they are doing, it's always likely that somebody somewhere is seeing something different. It's like trying to assure someone it's daylight and somebody insists it's nighttime. So, but given the fact that this current leader has been able to do well economically and socially, from our perspective, it's likely that he might prevail, but it's not a guarantee.
I see. It is far. You come from Senegal.
Yes.
Senegal is a great country. It has, it used to have a founding president, Leopold Sédar Senghor, a man who was one of the fathers of negritude.
Yes.
A man who was an artist to boot, and in fact, at one time, he was rumored to probably at one time who could have won a Nobel Prize for Literature.
Yeah, he was a member of the French Academy of, and I think all the Senegalese now, they have a lot of respect for Senghor because he ruled the country about 20 years and decided by himself to leave the power.
And he was, by the way, if I recall correctly, the chief grammarian of the French Parliament.
Absolutely.
During
and,
colonialism.
I think during the Second World War, him, Aimé Césaire, Léon Gontard Damas, they contributed to bring respect of the black people there. They were there, fight.
Yes, it did.
And of course, besides that, I think Senegalese, they respect him a lot because he contributed to open the democracy, because it's through him he decided to install multipartism in Senegal. You become with 3 parties, and then when he left power, the guy who replaced him, Abdou Diouf, come and open completely.
The tallest president in the world.
Yes, even taller than the basketball players. And Abdou Diouf opened all the who want to have, I think right now we have around 300 political parties.
Yes.
Some of them very teeny. We call them cabin telephonic parties.
Yes.
And Abdou Diouf himself, he was beaten by Abdoulaye Wade. It was the first transition pacific through election where Senegalese went and get rid of one president. It was Abdou Diouf, and Abdoulaye Wade came to power.
And he has, of course, the distinction of having conceded.
He called him that
with
night and tell him that you lost, and I gave him power. He went to Paris and was head of the Francophonie for years. Now he's back in Senegal taking care of his grandkids and things like that.
You also, of course, have the distinction of having produced Cheikh Anta Diop, the great intellectual, the man who said the Egyptian pyramids had Negroid features,
they're
and
still
therefore
there.
could probably have been built by Africans.
They're still there because I think Cheikh Anta Diop did a lot of research to say that the first civilizations were black, that Egypt, the Egypt of Pharaoh, were black. And in Nation Nègre et Culture, he contributed to elevate the way the colonizers was trying to show black people and the diaspora for his work. Until now, you have Pan-Africanists celebrating him because he gave back to us what belonged to us really. We are the diaspora and we were the first civilization on earth. We did a lot of things that people can see until now when you go to Egypt, when you go to Ethiopia, and when you go to Sudan. That part, I think, helped Senegal a lot because they have great intellectuals. I heard you talking about Ousmane Sembène.
Ousmane Sembène, of course, the father of African cinema.
African cinema.
I had the honor to be taught by him in the 1980s at UCLA Film School.
That guy, we have a personal relation because I was a pipe smoker when I was younger. And whenever I will come back from Paris, I will bring him a pipe. And most of the pipe that guy you will see.
Really?
Yeah, I will bring him those pipes.
The author, of course, of many books, including the classic God's Bits of Wood.
Absolutely. And then later we come back in 2000. That guy, Abdoulaye Wade, also beat Abdou Diouf through electoral process. But in 2012, himself, he was beaten by the actual President Macky Sall.
And he, too, conceded defeat with grace.
Yes, he had to.
Now, do you think that we're going to look at an election, frankly, that is driven or based on personalities or issues, especially given that the last time I checked, there is a very, very serious shortage of water in your country?
Yes, but what's surprising, I called my mom, she's still there. I say, you don't have water. Why are you going to vote for this guy? They are working. The water going to come. So what can you answer about that? Yeah, and my mom...
We're talking about 4 million people, apparently.
She lives in a town called Rufisque, and I call her, this guy is not bringing water. You're going to vote for her. Yes, it shows that they are working. And we see what they are doing right now. So, but not the youth.
But talking about democracy, You obviously have a very good record in the sense that in addition to, for example, the founding father having actually stepped aside and handed over power peacefully, whereas in fact there are so many other countries on the continent where you have individuals saying that they cannot possibly leave power because if they did, those nations will probably collapse. You also have an incumbent president, Macky Sall, who has actually reduced the term, the years that a president could actually serve from 7 to 5.
Yes, because the Constitution under Wade was saying 5 years. Abdoulaye Wade changed it because he wanted to run for a third mandate.
Yes.
And it did not work out because in 2012, Macky Sall beat him and he accepted graciously and went to Paris since then because he was very angry. His son was not allowed to run. He was condemned for stealing money. And after that, I think he was kind of, not pardoned, but he lived in Qatar. And Wade, I think, all these years never accepted that his son did not become president because the main issue people were discussing in 2012 was Mr. Wade want to run a third mandate to give the power to his son. And Senegal is not like Togo, I am sorry, it's not like Gabon, I am sorry.
Senegal is obviously neither a monarchy nor a kingdom.
No, and I think
it is a very proud republic.
Clearly, and people get rid of him. And he's still very angry because his son did not run. But all Senegalese know that Karim Wade, the son of Abdoulaye Wade, never won a single election in Senegal. He was beaten into his own neighborhood during local election in Dakar, in the neighborhood called Point E. He never won anything.
Interesting.
And the dad was so mad that after that loss, he decided he's going to appoint his son Minister of the Earth, the Sea, and the Sky. It's how Senegalese call him. And when I listen to press agencies presenting Karim Wade as a leader of the opposition, I say they don't know what they are talking about. At least the former mayor, I would say. But Karim Wade, no.
Very interesting. Let me come to you, Ambassador Robin Sanders. When you look at the democratic process on the African continent, you will agree with me that for some reason, the West African part of the continent seems to be doing reasonably well. The ECOWAS countries, when you talk about democracy, you seem to be doing very well in West Africa, especially when you compare with East Africa and North Africa. The second part of the region probably is Southern Africa. You served for several years in Nigeria as U.S. ambassador to Nigeria. What do you think is probably the secret behind that?
Well, I wanted to start by saying, you know, this is a year for African youth. Because the voters will primarily be young people across the continent. And so particularly in Senegal, particularly in Nigeria, and particularly for all of the 10 elections that are coming up. So I think that the dynamic shift that we are seeing, you know, in West Africa, we have some challenges, clearly, going forward. We have some challenges, of course, in East Africa, and we'll wait to see what happens in South Africa later in May. But I do think the shift is taking place because you have the bulk of the population, the young voters.
The young people, the changing demographics.
The changing demographics,
and I think, probably some would say in tandem with social media.
Well, both things have to work together. And I think technology, social media, but the real desire, I work with a lot of young people, as you know, in the work that I do today, and this real desire for change. This real desire for a change in leadership, for younger leadership, to see the continent really live up to its potential. So I think that, you know, this is definitely a young voters' election across the entire continent. And if you don't have the young voters with you, and I think they impact on whether or not people are voting for issues or development. Because I think that if you're voting for personalities, that's one group of the electorate. But I think with the young people, they're looking for not only issues, but also change and development.
You're talking about young people voting and what have you, and that probably is assuming, as a matter of fact, that a lot of these countries indeed hold elections. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of evidence, in fact, that on the contrary, a lot of countries on the African continent hold selections, mm-hmm. not elections, mm-hmm. whose results, for example, would reflect the will of the people, mm-hmm. but in fact that results tend to reflect the will of either the person who announces the vote mm-hmm. or the individuals who count the votes.
I think that you have to look at it country by country. I don't think that in this day and age the cookie-cutter approach works when you're looking at the continent. I do think you have to look at it country by country. Right now, you don't have the entire continent clearly having free, fair, and democratic elections. Okay, we know that. But I do think you need to look at it country by country. If I look at Ghana, for example, you know, hopefully Senegal will have a free and fair election. We know that there are challenges right now in Nigeria in terms of what's going to happen, but their 2015 election was deemed free and fair. So I do think that we have to look at it country by country, and we also have to look at, you know, what the challenges are per country. And we, as on the developing world side, really have to do our best to support the free, fair, and transparent processes, and really be supportive of those processes on the ground with stakeholders from the political parties, but certainly from civil society, and certainly with voter education.
Ali, the reason I actually brought about West Africa, ECOWAS, you know, member countries seems to be doing much better than the rest of the continent, is sincerely because when you look at Senegal, for example, it should be one of those countries that you could probably classify as one of the beacons of hope for African democracy. You could add on Ghana. You could add on Benin. You could talk about other countries. Mm-hmm. When you go, on the other hand, you go to East Africa, it becomes very, very difficult for you even to get a single country. You can go, of course, Southern Africa. You have South Africa itself. You have Botswana. You have Namibia. You have a very good democratic record. When you go to Central Africa, it will be very difficult for you to actually even come up with probably one country. You go to North Africa, it is pretty much the same story. What is the secret behind West Africa in terms of democracy, really?
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting that Senegal and Nigeria are having an election almost at the same time, but I think somebody needs to settle an argument between these two countries about jollof rice.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be like that. It's only because something that was not supposed to happen happened in the land of the ogres, Nigeria.
But we have to settle the jollof rice issue at some point. But coming back to your question, I think we are watching a changing trend in Africa, on the continent generally. First of all, our leaders are getting a little bit younger than they used to be. I think with the...
Your leaders are getting younger than they used to be?
Well, let me come. I know some of them are still very old.
You're talking about President Muhammadu Buari.
Hold on. Let me
You're talking about one of the key contenders, Atiku Abubakar, in Nigeria.
Okay. These two leaders in Nigeria have so much else, so much more in common. First of all, they are both Muslims. They are both from the north. They are both in their 70s. Atiku is 72, Buhari is 76. So if you consider, right from when Robert Mugabe stepped down or was forced to step down, somebody a little bit younger than him took over.
Really?
Well, isn't he younger than Mugabe?
Yes, younger than Mugabe, but relatively in the same league, really, because you can't possibly call Mr. Mnangagwa a young Turk.
Shaka, the point I'm trying to bring is the role youth play in our political systems these days. The advent of social media, the ability of the world to learn, to know things much faster than it used to. Even the systems of campaigns have changed tremendously over the years.
But that is not limited to West Africa.
No, I know, but it is also contributing to the changing trends that you are witnessing in Africa. Africa has certain common factors tying it to each other, but they are not really alike. If you divide Africa into two, between Francophone Africa and Anglophone Africa, the way things are done politically are not really the same way.
So if you take that route, what about Lusophonic Africa?
Right. Well, Africans are Africans anyway.
That's why I say you can't do a cookie-cutter approach, basically. You really have to look at what's happening in each and every country.
Right.
And even the role that the judiciary has played negatively or positively in some countries. If you look at last summer with the role that the judiciary played in the Kenyan election, having the Kenyan election to be redone. So
round one
and round two.
But no round two, really.
But I think that's why I don't like the cookie-cutter approach, because I think that the dynamics on the ground for each and every country is so drastically different. The one thing I will say overall, though, is the role that the youth voters are going to play in all of the elections that are coming up.
Well, I have to say, time is not our best ally, those guests of mine in the studio. Let's go to Abuja, where my colleague Grace Alheri Abdu is standing by. Good evening, Grace. Good evening, Grace.
Hi, good evening, Shaka.
How are you?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am hugely terrific. What is the mood like on the ground in Abuja?
Nigerians are ready and eager to go to the polls come Saturday. You know, even after the postponement of the elections, you know, there were people thinking that a lot of people will be discouraged and either not go back to their villages or places where they register to vote. But what we are hearing on ground is totally different, because I can see there's a lot of excitement. As a matter of fact, some of the political groups called on their members, if you already travel out of city, wherever you travel from, you should stay where you are until you cast your vote. And so if you go to offices, a lot of people are not back. They decided to stay back. And those that are able to come back, either to, for instance, people traveling out of Abuja to their respective states, those that were able to come back came back with the intention of either leaving tomorrow or on Friday. So I can tell you there's a lot of excitement about this election.
Now, talking about the excitement, Grace, what is driving the campaign? What has been driving the campaign so far? Has the campaign really been on issues? Have we talked about the Nile Delta, for example? Have we talked about unemployment? Have we talked about those types of things? Or is it about personalities?
I don't know whether to call it about personality or issues, but I can tell you, for one, I have seen a lot of young people determining to cast their vote for the first time, not that they just turned 18, but for whatever reason they are gingered up and they are excited. And I've seen women group mobilizing other women to go to the polls. I know, for one, the candidate for People's Democratic Party, that is Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, has promised the youth and the women that if elected into office, he's going to give the women 30%, and he's going to give the youth 40% of all his cabinet positions. So I don't know whether for those that are supporting PDP, whether that is their driving force. But you know, President Muhammadu Buari has been campaigning, one, on the intention to fight corruption, secondly, to boost economy, thirdly, to address the security problems. So I can tell you, both parties, the supporters of both parties are very, very gingered up, and they are doing everything possible to see that their candidate win the day.
What about the fact that President Muhammadu Buari 4 years ago promised, among other things, that he was going to clean the Niger Delta. And the last time I checked, nothing really much has happened in the Niger Delta. Is that something that people are talking about?
I think for the most part, for those that are supporting the PDP candidate, Atiku Abubakar, for the most part, that is their driving force, saying that President Muhammadu Buhari had made many promises that he is yet to fulfill. Talking about security, they are saying they are still facing security challenges. Talking about unemployment, they are saying they are worse off.